Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up to just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Gloria Nesich. Gloria is an entrepreneur behind TheLyranEmpress Designs, and I'm really excited to chat with her. Gloria, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Jonno. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you. Appreciate you coming on. And first of all, can you just let people know a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, in the corporate side, I'm actually a technical project manager. Right now, though, I am focused on going back 22 years into my passion, which is art, and exclusively art and sketching and watercolors and paint in general. And I'm trying to incorporate that along with my children, who are also artists. So I've built this design concept with them in mind, and hopefully I'll be able to transfer that to them in the future.
I love that. That's a wonderful, that's just a wonderful story. And speaking of stories, it's great to get to know a little bit about you. So tell us about Gloria. You know, even as far back as when you were, growing up, what are some of the stories that come to mind that have really shaped you becoming the person and the leader you are today, Gloria?
Well, in short term, I grew up an only child of a 1968 Olympic selected swimmer who is also an Oxford graduated CPA. So literally there could be nothing less than for me to be successful, right?
Yeah. Wow.
However, that success, what it entails in the path towards what one may consider a success is truly a personal journey. So for me, a career having a front row voice was truly not something that appealed to me. I mean, my personality itself as an INTJ is I like to work in the shadows. I like to be behind everything. So even right now, like this gives me stage fright, right? But we have to work through those fears and yeah. And so we work through those fears and through my personal journey, I've seen that what is most important to me is seeing others succeed.
Yeah.
And being able to hone into their personal talents. So I shine only if everyone else shines.
Yeah, I like that. I shine only if everyone else shines. So growing up wow, that's I really love how you so succinctly started by pointing out growing up with that, yeah, just with that incredible success in in your parents' life. That's really I can imagine can create a bit of a shadow to put some pressure on. When you think back to those years, was there anything in particular? Are there any real pivotal moments for you where you remember, like for some reason it's really stuck with you? It was a really meaningful moment in shaping you into the person you are today.
Yeah, most definitely. Like there's so many of them. Um, my mother is manic depressive. And the reason for that is through her own personal journey, she had
Mm-hmm.
many failures along the way after great success. So the
Yeah.
unfortunate part with that is that these occurred to her as she was already a mother. In turn, like I knew about all her back history, but I got to see the worst of it. And
Wow.
with that said, you have to have a certain maturity level to truly appreciate and understand not just your parents' journey, but also what they're giving to you. And as an observer, once more, you
Mm,
have to learn that there's things that you cannot take personally, and you have to be more understanding of others. In this case, of my parent.
yeah.
Um, yeah, she was still able, like to retire at 48, and she was highly successful. She was in politics and our little city here, and all kinds of things. But that statement that is always the edge of madness is, as a workaholic that she was and a
Mm,
perfectionist that she was, if things didn't work out exactly as she planned them to, it was utter hell for her. So I didn't
yeah.
want to go through that same experience. I just want to go through the journey and appreciate everything, including the failures. And the reason for that is I myself have had many failures.
Mm.
However, I don't take them personally. I use them as a challenge to do better for myself.
Yeah, that's a wonderful lesson that you learned, and I think what I love about that story is you obviously have an awareness now, you can see why, your mum struggled with that. Did you have that empathy at the time, or do you remember when that penny dropped for you and you understood, I guess, some of the reasoning behind why she struggled so much with failure?
Um, I did have that empathy at the time because, again, I mean, when you're fully dependent in one person, you understand that you have to have that empathy. You have to have that faith that they're going to be successful, because you're in full dependence of them.
Yeah.
When I was young, I used to say, "Why aren't you like other mothers? Why can't you cook and clean and be like a normal mother?" And she would get so mad at me. And now, personally, I understand, having 4 children myself, exactly what she went through. So I've come full circle in so many different ways that it's really funny. But yeah, I have a tremendous appreciation for what I was given.
Yeah, and I love your perspective on failure. Tim Ferriss, who I love his podcast, the Tim Ferriss Show, he has a great question that he asks, which is, for people to share their favorite failures, because he tries to really push that idea that, we need to change the way we see failure. So I'd love to pose that to you. With your different perspective on failure, as you reflect, are there any moments where you look back and you dropped the ball, or you weren't able to get something that you thought you were going to get, but you've been able to look back on it and see it as a really pivotal, foundational moment for good for you in your life, and it's really taught you some lessons?
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think my most pivotal moment came during 2008. At that time, I was at AIG Auto, and of course, everyone knows that that's also the moment where there was a huge economic crash, right? So I had always been in insurance since like 1997. So I was still in insurance, and at that time, I was going after a permanent position since a lot of the company was sold to other companies. And I had an interview with an individual who told me, "That's right. It's not what you know, it's who you know." And I was like, "Hold on, that's not what I said at all. I'm telling you that, I've been here for 7 years. I've done this. I've, gone up the ladder. And the whole reason that it was a failure is because I didn't get the position because I did not have a degree." So at that point, I went back to school.
Wow.
And I completed my bachelor's in accounting with a minor in economics, an MBA with a specialization in information technology, and then an MPA because I wanted to get into local government, which was another rejection I got. So, yeah, basically my entire rejection career-wise back then, which again, it's so long ago now, right? It's truly laughable. It's a gift in the way that, now nobody can tell me it's because I don't have education.
That's
But
incredible. Wow.
yeah,
That's really a story of how you took that and you turned it around, and that's a list and a half that you went
yeah, in five
and
years
worked
I
on.
completed all that while working, 80-hour weeks, two
Wow.
jobs, and 4 children.
Yeah. I have no words. That's incredible. Um, and so through your career, after you did that, and you've done these studies, and what about any mentors? Are there any leaders that you've had the privilege to be led by, or you've been part of their team, or you've watched from a bit further away, and just really the way they've led has really stood out to you, and you've just watched them and thought, that's the sort of leader I want to be?
Oh, most definitely as well. I mean, again, it also starts at this AIG Auto position that I had, because again, we were going through the whole transition of being sold and um, everything getting restructured because of the situation. My direct manager at the time made a deal with the other management within the building. And, little by little, everybody was getting laid off. It was inevitable. He, however, managed to keep his entire team intact by doing what all the other managers could not do. And that was give everyone their little severance package,
Wow.
manila folder. Yeah. So in the end, he said he wouldn't do it if his team was touched. And so I think that that's very important when it comes to corporate positions in general. You need to know who your team is, and you need to have your team's back, because they'll have your back if,
Wow.
things are.
Was there so how did he do that? Was there anything, like, obviously he just said, I will not do this unless, but was there anything else in how he led and how he was able to get through that you remember? Like, what was it that he did that other managers weren't able to do?
Basically tell it like it is. First off, he was taking care of all his people. Second, he was making sure that we were all securing jobs along the way as time passed. We knew that we were going to be there till the end. We had like job fairs, we had all kinds of things occur to make sure that everybody had a secure position as we were leaving. So it was just all the extra effort. And in his case, he didn't even need to work. Like, he came from a family where they had a successful restaurant business.
Wow.
Yeah. So he literally could have just left the day that he knew everything was done.
But he stuck around and made sure he got the whole team through it.
Right. And all that has to do with, personal responsibility and your ability to really touch other people and understand what they need.
That's a beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it reminds me in this podcast how much nearly every episode this comes up, which is what you just described. Great leaders that people remember, that like for, and if leaders want to leave a legacy and want to be remembered, it's worth stopping and realizing Gloria just mentioned this leader. So this is someone who's had an influence on you years down the track. You remember him. And what did he do? He had his people's back. He had their back. He had their best interests at heart. He went into bat for them. And we remember, and it makes a mark on us when a leader does that for us. And I think it sounds obvious, but leaders, entrepreneurs, managers, CEOs need to realize that if you want to leave a legacy like he did with you, and be brought up in these sort of contexts when people say, who is a leader you love, then you need to find a way to have your teams back, go the extra mile, and go into bat for them.
Yes, definitely. Now, with that situation, the way I ended up is somebody that I knew 10 years back, also in insurance, found me on LinkedIn, and they're like, hey, we're hiring. So that was a whole other full circle. Like, they remembered me as, a noob back then in insurance 10 years before. And they're like, hey, we're hiring. So that's very rewarding too.
You're right. So, yeah. It's you don't burn bridges, right? Like, wherever you can, right, you do your best, and you take, I think as well, it's one thing to say, do your best, but as leaders, there's opportunities. Like, there are definitely opportunities where you can throw people under the bus, either in the moment or when you're in the social setting, and there's a juicy story of someone who really, was dropped the ball somewhere, or really just at the time really might have irritated you the wrong way. But I always say it, and my wife Liz, we always talk about this. It's like, don't burn bridges. Keep, wherever you can, keep the relationship, prioritize the relationship. No matter what someone does to you, try to do the right thing by them. And it's amazing how often it's the best people, but it's amazing how those people, they come back down the track and you go, thank goodness I never burnt any bridges there, because that ended up being the most important thing in my life now. Whereas 10 years ago, I thought it would never matter again.
Right. That's exactly the point. I still keep in touch with people from 20 years back. I have people who remember me that I've impacted that I had no clue I impacted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great, Gloria. I love your story. I think it's such an inspirational story. What about in more recent years? Are there any stories, like what are your what is one of your favorite stories from recent years as a leader? Like, is there anything that comes to mind where for you it really sticks in your mind how you were able to help someone in your team, or you just had a big win that for some reason comes to mind right now, or you had a failure or as a team where you dropped the ball but you learned something? Any sort of stories from more recent years that come to mind?
Oh, sure. With COVID happening, a full transition occurred at my prior um, position where, we all had to go remote. Well, some people feel more comfortable in a office setting because the contact that is involved, right? You can go to somebody's desk or somebody's office and ask a question because they're there. When you're doing remote work, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
You don't have the face-to-face contact anymore. Sometimes you don't have video whatsoever in these calls. It's just like, an audio. But you have to have a certain feel to when you know that somebody, especially as a project manager, because you have so many people that depend on you, when you feel that someone feels out of touch. And so with that said, I was always constantly communicating with everyone in my team and other teams just to make sure that they understood that they were supported and heard, whether there was an office or not.
And how did you, I think that's a great point. What did you do? What did you find that worked really well doing that remotely? Because that's a big head scratcher for leaders at the moment, is we've all gone, yeah, remote work, it's so good. We need to embrace it. Oh my goodness, it's really hard to lead in that context. How did you do that? Like practically, what did you find that worked for you, Gloria, as a leader?
For me personally, we had a variety of different applications, from WebEx to Slack to Zoom to Discord. I mean, all kinds of things. But personally, I would dial them on my phone and have a one-to-one conversation. Up to like 2 weeks after I actually finished this position, they were still calling me to make sure that I was okay. So that tells you as well, hey, they miss you. And for me, it's like, okay, I'm everything's fine. I'm glad you're still doing great. I'll be fine. But, they're still calling me to this very day to let me know, hey, this is what's happening at work. And I'm like, okay, well, this is how you want to do this, or how you want to decide on this other situation. Yeah. So I'm like the mother for everybody.
No, that's, what I love. And you reminded me of this by telling that story. There's a book called Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud, and it's a really interesting book. He defines integrity. I don't have it in front of me, but it's something like defines integrity as taking, I'm just going to Google it while I talk, because otherwise I'm going to do a terrible job. But the reason it came to mind is in this book, he talks about how leaders we leave a wake like a boat. If how you have a boat that leaves its, you look behind and you see the ocean is all, or the river is all like there's waves and that, behind a boat. And he talks about this idea of what's your wake behind you as a leader. Like, don't just look ahead and forge ahead, actually look back and go, what am I leaving behind me? Are there turbulent waves that people are screaming and trying to get out of the way of? Have I left, what sort of messes have I left behind me? What I love about your story you just described is, I think, the ultimate wake that's great for all of us, and really what we want to see is exactly what you described. It's when the people on our teams are saying, wait, I know you're not officially my leader anymore, but from behind the boat, you see we've actually made an impact on people's lives. Rather than leaving disasters and pain behind us, we leave people behind us who say, I still want to connect because you really had a good impact on my life.
Absolutely. I think that goes along with like what Robert Greenleaf stated once, and that was that he found that thinkers are often removed from influential positions through his career experience. And for me, I took that saying and, okay, I'm not CEO, I'm not CIO, I'm not the CFO, I'm a project manager, but I am as influential as the CIO, CFO, or CEO
Yeah.
because of the impact that I have directly with everyone.
100%. And that is leadership. And that's why, I haven't really found a better definition than what John Maxwell talks about how it's leadership is influence. And you're 100% right. We all look at the positions and look at the job titles and, maybe not so much now, but a while back, the corner office. If I had that office, it's like that doesn't matter. Like positional authority is the first, the first level, as I think, once again, John Maxwell talks about levels of leadership, and it's level one. It's really like, and that's what I love about your perspective. If you can, and someone else on the podcast recently, I can't remember who it was, they said this great thing about realizing, coming to terms with leading based on what you can do, not what you would like to do, but actually just going, what can I do? Who can I influence right now? And I feel like that's something I really need to learn more of, is going, what can I do today? I know Jonno's got plans and dreams for what he could do in 10 years time, but who am I getting, to talk to today? Who can I influence today in my job? If I'm a CEO, CIO, project manager, I'm a graduate or I'm a student, I'm a teacher, whatever my role is, who can I influence today? And if I can take responsibility for that, invest in them and leave a good wake behind my sort of boat in terms of how I'm influencing that person, then I'm going to, I think partly you sort of, from there, you almost can't fail because you'll be successful. If you help enough people get what they want, you end up getting what you want, which is a great Zig Ziglar quote. And that whole idea of just caring for others, it's not only the right thing to do, it's not only like the right thing to do by others, but it's also just a really great philosophy as well, even if you look at it from the point of being successful, I think.
Yes. Now, for me, I'm from a culture called the Basque culture. And so my last team, I left them with a word in Basque, which is argibade, which basically in my language, there are no words for information. Argibade means is basically let the light show you the way. So go the way to the light. So to me, what that means is always follow through to the very end in anything you do or anything you set up for yourself to do. Information key, aside. Once you set a goal, make sure you complete it. And I think that's one of the things that many people have a hard time doing as well. Like, okay, well, I want to do this, I want to be that, but through the path, somehow they get misguided and go somewhere else. But that might actually be the path that was meant to be.
Yeah, that's beautiful. How do you say it again? What's the phrase in your language?
IGB there.
That is beautiful. I love that thought. And what a lovely thing to leave with your people. It's just so lovely to get to know you, Gloria, and hear how you lead. Let's, I really want to ask you these questions, Leadership Express questions, because I think you're going to have some really interesting answers, and this is a lot of fun. So are you ready?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, firstly, what is a book that you've gifted to other people?
I have gifted so many journals. So, the reason for this, I think that everybody wants to read other people's story, but I think that everybody has a strong story to evaluate about themselves. So I want everyone to jot down the ins and outs of themselves, and as much as listening to others, they need to listen and contemplate upon their own person. But as far as like a professional or published book, I would say The Journey to the East by Herman Hesse.
Journey to the East by Herman Hesse. I love how you flipped that around as well. That's great. What's a book that you've gifted? A journal. It was someone in another episode recently, they shared that I said, what's a great piece of advice you've received? And they said, well, it's a great question someone asked me. And I was like, oh, that's another good one. It's always, I love it when I ask someone a question. And the journal, I haven't had that one before, but I love that. You're so right. And I talk about this a little bit, but have you come across Andrew Huberman, the Huberman Lab podcast? Have you come across any of his work?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it. And the reason I mention it, he's a neurobiologist, I think, neuroscientist, neurobiologist. And I think he talks about in his podcast. So he's sort of like I really love his work around productivity and leadership and health, sleep, but from a neurobiological sort of perspective. And he has some really interesting things about journaling and about what happens when, like, why is it that it's so effective for us, not only in sharing our story but also in clearing our thoughts. And so it's one thing to know those things, right? Like, because they help us and we go, that's helpful. But I love his podcast because he unpacks the science behind it. And it's like, particularly around things like sleep. I've gone down a tangent now, but I'm fascinated by, for leaders, I love, saying to leaders, if you took your sleep as seriously as you take your strategic plan or your, then, because, it's so significant. And he unpacks the science of that. But I think he covers some of the elements in journaling too. Like, what is it about when we say, do a process like that what's it actually doing in our brain, and why is that so helpful? So anyway, that just came to mind. For anyone who loves journaling but wants to understand why, some of the science behind it, that's a fantastic podcast.
Amazing. I'm going to definitely look him up.
Oh, you'll love it. It's one of my favorites. Speaking of great podcasts, do you have any that you would love to recommend, any that you're enjoying listening to? And of course, also feel free to mention any of your own. I really want to, direct everyone to you and anything you do as well. So as you answer these questions, anything of yours, Gloria, feel free to mention it. But any podcast that you're loving at the moment?
Well, right now I'm actually loving live feeds on Twitter. I mean, there's so many great people out there around the world. I just want to be heard,
Yeah.
So as far as my personal state of anyone being better than anyone else, I can't even state that. Like, my personal list is so diverse that one moment I could be listening to Joe Rogan, the next I'm listening to George Norrie reruns, and I'm just like that oddball who likes to truly expand themselves into even things that are of discomfort to me.
That's a good answer, and that's legitimate. I've had someone else answer similarly, and I think it's a great answer. That's really great that you approach it that way. I love that. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time or been reminded of?
Oh boy. Well, I had a complete team of individuals who look forward to my presence every single day until recently. And like I said, I still keep up with them and reach out as I can around my schedule. So the impact of building relationships long-term has been a serious lesson, or also very reassuring that what I'm doing is the right thing.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. And it's so true. And I think connection is something that leaders underestimate. I find myself coaching leaders, and you'd be surprised at how often one of the things that I encourage people to do is get out of their office more, where they're in a physical office environment and they can actually be there, but get out of their office more and just go and connect with their people intentionally. And it sounds ridiculous, but particularly when people are great individual contributors and highly skilled and, and with 50 things on our plates, but you just can't replace, and you can't exaggerate the importance of connection with your people.
Right. And I mean, especially in full awareness, like actively listening and getting to know individuals.
Yeah. There's nothing like it, is it? People are precious, and it's funny how it sticks with people when you do something small and take that moment, be fully present. I heard this funny thing that's really stuck with me, and I don't really understand it, but for some reason it might just be a Jonno thing, but it's from this book about being charismatic. It's like, the whole point of the book is that anyone can be charismatic. We can learn to have charisma. It's not just something that people have or don't have. And they define charisma. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I find it very interesting. They define charisma as being confident. So if someone wants to develop their charisma, even with just how they say present publicly, and then it's actually just being really confident. What's the second one? or I think that's right, thinking the best of someone. So I'll tell all three because I started sharing this now. But in this book, the author, who I can't remember the author's name, but if people look up charisma book, it should come up. It's pretty well known. But the author gives these three sort of tips around things you can do to be more charismatic. And they're going to sound silly, but I found it helpful, so I'll share it. The confident one is when you're about to walk into a room, particularly for introverts, to imagine yourself as like a gorilla that's about to run through the room. And I know that sounds so ridiculous, but the mindset in terms of, say you're about to go on stage and you imagine, okay, if I was a gorilla about to run on stage and just like be ridiculous, and then just to walk with that confidence, okay, that's one. And I don't really do that much because, well, I probably, that's not an area that I lack as much as confidence. But for me, being present is something I've struggled with. And they talk about one of the three is that ability to be present. And that people who have that charisma, when they capture you in a conversation, as an example, because they're so present. And this is the one that really stuck with me, as the author said, imagine when you're with someone that you're like, see your brain going down through your body and into your big toe and just rest it there on the ground. And I was like, what on earth? This is the weirdest. But it's funny, I do this. And so sorry to people that I've been in meetings with who now you're thinking, was Jonno putting his brain into his toe? But when I struggle to be present, you know how you're sitting with someone, or even virtually, you're sitting with someone, right? Or on the phone, and you find your mind wandering. I've done this and I don't know why, I don't understand it, but it really has helped me to like bring myself really present into the room, to just be focused on that one moment, putting your brain into your big toe. There you go. Never thought you'd hear that on a leadership podcast. Oh, and I should finish the third thought. And this is a nicer one. It's less weird, which is thinking the best of people, right? And they talk about, the author says, imagine people have angel wings. And they've got those angel wings because they've done something really good. Even if, sometimes we get a vibe from people and it's like, for different reasons, maybe we don't necessarily like connect with them as well as with other people initially. But imagine they've got this set of angel wings because they've done some incredibly amazing thing in their life at some point. And those angel wings are because they're an incredible person. And that, for me, once again, it's just a funny little mindset thing that puts a smile on your face and helps you to see this person who maybe they have slighted you recently, if there's someone that you work with, or maybe you just don't have the best vibe with them naturally. You can actually change in that moment and just choose to really assume the best of them, which is what they talk about in the book. Charismatic people do really well.
Yes, and I think you brought a great point when it comes to you choose how you're going to react to something.
Yeah.
That's very, very important. Now, statistically, brown hair and brown eyes tend to have a natural ability to get people to open up. They're considered the trustworthy characterizations of individuals. So I've heard some of the craziest stories from people that you would never believe, wow, but I guess I'm lucky in that sense that, people do tend to open up to me eventually.
Yeah,
if it's a strong character or not, or,
No, I think it's a gift, particularly in leadership. So what's a great piece of advice that you've received? If you think back, life doesn't have to be about leadership, but a great piece of advice someone's given you at one point.
Never take anything personally. We're all like wanting what we believe we most deserve. And even though it is competitive, we all eventually get what we've worked hard for.
Don't take anything personally. That's good advice. The world would be a better place if we all did a bit more of that, I think, Gloria.
Yeah.
What about a movie or TV show that really impacted you?
Well, I have a quirk. So every year I watch The Last Time I Saw Paris. And what I understood, I've been doing this since I was in 1988. So I understood at an early age that some things are much more important than money. A lot to other people, it's money, fame, power. But I've learned and seen through the external experience not to be capricious in regards to relationships. of any kind. And if you are going to devote your life to something, do so without any regrets and within reasonable understanding that life will throw curveballs.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. What was the movie again?
The last time I saw Paris,
The Last Time I Saw Paris. Oh,
yeah, with
great
Brian
recommendation.
Johnson and Elizabeth Taylor.
Every year since 1988, did you say?
Yes, I watch it
Wow.
every single year.
I love that. That's I don't really have anything that I watch every year like that. That's beautiful. As I probably have watched multiple times. One of the things I've watched multiple times, which I've mentioned multiple times on the podcast, is Band of Brothers. If anyone enjoys war movies, that's a mini series that is just it's just like it's full on. And when it comes to building a team and leadership and poor leadership, like through that series, it doesn't get much. Just the production and the true stories, because it's true stories from the war. It's just but yeah, I haven't. That's something I would consider watching every year, right? Like Lord of the Rings might be another one, but that's more just because it's the story's so good. But The Last Time I Saw Paris, beautiful, great recommendation.
And the main
Okay,
thing about that is like,
yeah,
the situation within that story, it can be adapted in every environment and every situation. So basically the keynotes is think long-term, do short-term, and evaluate constantly where you stand.
Yeah, that's like that's that's sort of a great leadership business 101 as well. If we could all do
Yeah.
that a bit better, that's great. I love that takeaway. That's gold. Okay, last question. If you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader, what would you say?
A leader is not always the boss. A leader is a service-minded individual that sees not just the end goals for a corporation, but demonstrates them, and they can manifest through leading by example without a constant I am the leader mentality. We are all in the same boat together in different roles, and those positions are constantly shifting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice for a young leader. And I think, anytime that you feel like you need to remind people of your role and your title, stop and do what Gloria just said. Look at, okay, how can I serve and support these people, and how can I model it? All this stuff sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it's really hard to do. It's easy to talk about, it's hard to do, but model it. If you want, it's so funny, isn't it? How we go, oh, and my team, I really want people to be more, I really want to have a higher standard of excellence. Well, what are you modeling? How can we model that? If we can take what we're modeling to another level, and if we can get in there and support and say, how can I serve you? Like, what can I do to help? How can I support my team and my people? They're two great things you can do to move forward. So that's wonderful advice, Gloria. Love it. So if people want to find you to connect in terms of LinkedIn or Twitter, what's the best way for people to connect with you online, Gloria?
On LinkedIn, I'm Gloria Nesich, and that would be my more professional life. And then on Twitter, it gets more controversial with my posts and, a little bit of law and traction, a little bit of esotericism, politics, all that stuff. And TheLyranEmpress at TheLyranEmpress on Twitter.
Yeah, great. I love that. No, it's good. It's I think polarizing is good, and one of the things I really want to do more and more is to break down echo chambers and to meet with and learn from people who completely disagree with me about things. And so I think one of the things we need to do, and I believe the people who are listening to this podcast are probably going to be wired a bit like this, is to connect professionally with people like you, but also I think it's always a good reminder, if some people are just going to gel exactly with what you say over on Twitter, some people are going to disagree, and that's great, because that's what we all need more of. Because if we can break down our echo chambers, I think sometimes we can really improve how we think about things. So I think it's great that you are putting some polarizing content out there over on Twitter. And if that's not someone's cup of tea, then LinkedIn's the place to find Gloria and connect with her professionally there. Because as you can tell from this podcast, she's very lovely to talk to. So wonderful. Well, I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. This has been such a great chat with Gloria. I think one of my favorite stories so far in terms of Gloria's background and her philosophy on leadership has been lovely. Don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno Leadership Podcast, where I give you tips on, how do you cast vision, build a high performance team? What's the difference between a great leader and a bad leader? Like, why are some people good leaders? All sorts of stuff like that. And the leadership question of the day, where I put a stone in your shoe, ask you a different question every day to challenge you as a leader. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to Gloria for being so generous with your time. It's past 10 o'clock at night where you are, so you're being very generous with your time. But this has been so much fun, and your story is amazing. And also your wisdom and thoughts around leadership has been really refreshing. And I think it'll really encourage a lot of listeners. So thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Jonno. And I hope that we get to speak again in the few months or years and see where we end up. That's part of the journey itself is such a wonderful experience. So I wish you the best. And I think you have so much potential with your podcast and what you're doing as well.
Thank you. You're very kind. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you, if you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called The Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.